48 hours ago, the USS Eisenhower carrier strike group repositioned 400 kilometers farther from the Persian Gulf. The move was not presented as a retreat. Official statements described it as a tactical adjustment to optimize operational flexibility, but everyone watching the deployment maps understood what had happened. For the first time in modern naval history, an American carrier group had been pushed back by a weapon it could not defend against. The catalyst was a test. Iranian state media broadcast footage of a missile launch from a mobile platform in the Zagros Mountains. The missile was identified as the Fateh-2, a domestically produced hypersonic glide vehicle that Iran had been developing for 3 years. Western intelligence agencies were aware of the program but had assessed it as aspirational rather than operational. The assumption was that Iran lacked the precision manufacturing capability and materials science expertise to build a functional hypersonic weapon. The test proved otherwise. The missile lifted off on a ballistic trajectory, reaching an apogee of approximately 100 kilometers before separating its glide vehicle. The vehicle then maneuvered, adjusting its flight path mid-course using aerodynamic control surfaces. It descended toward a target barge positioned in the Gulf of Oman, 1,200 kilometers from the launch site. Terminal velocity was estimated at Mach 15, roughly 18,500 kilometers per hour. The impact was direct, filmed from multiple angles, and broadcast globally within hours. The target barge was a mock-up, built to the approximate dimensions and radar signature of an aircraft carrier superstructure. The symbolism was not subtle. Iran was demonstrating that it could hit a carrier-sized target with a weapon traveling too fast for existing missile defense systems to intercept. Hypersonic weapons operate in a speed regime where physics creates nearly insurmountable challenges for defenders. The U.S. Navy's Aegis combat system, installed on cruisers and destroyers escorting carrier strike groups, is designed to track and engage threats traveling up to Mach 5. The SPY-1 radar can detect faster objects, but the fire control algorithms and interceptor missiles are optimized for targets that move predictably and within interception envelopes that allow engagement solutions to be calculated in real time. A hypersonic glide vehicle at Mach 15 compresses decision timelines to seconds. By the time radar tracking confirms the threat, calculates the trajectory, and launches an interceptor, the incoming weapon has already adjusted course and accelerated beyond the engagement window. Current interceptors like the SM-6 have a maximum speed of Mach 3.5. They cannot catch a target moving 4 times faster, particularly when that target can maneuver unpredictably during its terminal approach. The mathematical reality is simple. If an aircraft carrier is the target, and a hypersonic missile is launched from 1,400 kilometers away, the flight time to impact is approximately 6 minutes. The carrier, traveling at its maximum speed of 30 knots or 56 kilometers per hour, can reposition itself roughly 5.6 kilometers during that time. The missile's terminal guidance system accounts for movement across distances far greater than that. Evasive maneuvers are irrelevant. The USS Eisenhower strike group commander was briefed on the test results within hours. The analysis was unambiguous. If Iran chose to employ the Fateh-2 against the carrier, there was no effective defense. Aegis could not intercept it. Electronic warfare could not spoof it. The carrier could not outrun it. The only variable under U.S. control was distance. Operating farther from the Iranian coast would increase flight time, providing more opportunity for detection and potentially more time to attempt long-range interception, but it would not change the fundamental vulnerability. The decision to reposition was made at the flag level and approved by CENTCOM. The strike group moved from its station 120 kilometers off the Iranian coast to a position 520 kilometers offshore. The new distance placed the carrier outside the immediate reaction zone but still within the 1,400-kilometer range of the Fateh-2. The repositioning bought time, not safety. If Iran launched, the flight time increased from 6 minutes to approximately 18 minutes. More warning, more time to prepare, but still no guaranteed interception capability. The operational impact was immediate. FA-18 Super Hornets launching from the Eisenhower now faced a one-way flight distance of over 500 kilometers to reach targets inside Iran. Fuel consumption increased by 35%. Time over target decreased proportionally. Sorties that previously allowed 45 minutes of loiter time for close air support or strike coordination were now compressed to 20 minutes. Fewer missions could be flown per day. Each mission carried less payload due to increased fuel requirements. Combat effectiveness declined measurably. Aerial refueling could mitigate some of the range penalty, but tanker availability was finite. Every additional refueling requirement pulled tankers away from supporting other missions. The logistics chain strained under the added burden. Flight schedules were adjusted, mission profiles were rewritten. The entire operational tempo of the carrier air wing slowed. Meanwhile, Iranian media amplified the narrative. The test was described as a defensive breakthrough that neutralized American naval power projection. Commentary emphasized that the carrier, long the symbol of U.S. military dominance, could now be held at risk by a missile costing a fraction of the ship's $13 billion price tag. The cost exchange calculus was emphasized repeatedly. One Fateh II missile, estimated at $10 to $15 million to produce, could potentially mission kill or sink a carrier worth 1,000 times that amount, and carrying 5,000 personnel. Western defense analysts debated the test's implications. Some argued that the Fateh II was a prototype and that mass production at scale was unlikely. Others pointed out that even a small inventory of operational hypersonic missiles would fundamentally alter the risk calculation for carrier deployments. A carrier group could defend against aircraft, cruise missiles, and even ballistic missiles with some confidence. But a hypersonic weapon traveling at Mach 15 with terminal maneuverability was a different category of threat. The Pentagon's public response was measured. Statements acknowledged the test and noted that the U.S. was developing its own hypersonic weapons and advanced interceptor systems. The timeline for fielding those systems was not specified, but informed observers understood it was measured in years, not months. Hypersonic interceptors capable of engaging Mach 15 targets were in early development. The technology required new propulsion systems, advanced guidance algorithms, and materials that could withstand the thermal and structural stresses of hypersonic flight. Current programs projected initial operational capability no earlier than 2028. In the near term, the U.S. Navy had no technical counter to the Fateh II. The only available mitigation was distance, and distance came with operational costs. China was watching. The People's Liberation Army had deployed its own hypersonic anti-ship missile, the DF-17, in 2020. The weapon had been designed explicitly to target U.S. carrier groups in the event of a conflict over Taiwan. Iran's successful test validated the concept and demonstrated that even nations with limited defense budgets could develop credible hypersonic capabilities. If Iran could build a functional hypersonic glide vehicle, other nations could as well. The proliferation risk was clear. Russia had already fielded multiple hypersonic systems, including the Kinzhal air-launched missile and the Zircon sea-launched cruise missile. Both were designed with anti-ship applications in mind. North Korea claimed to have tested a hypersonic missile in 2021, though Western analysts disputed the performance data. Regardless of current capabilities, the trajectory was evident. Hypersonic weapons were spreading, and the U.S. Navy's traditional advantages in air defense were eroding. The Eisenhower's repositioning marked a strategic inflection point. For 8 decades, American aircraft carriers had operated with relative impunity in contested waters. Air defenses could be suppressed, enemy fleets could be outranged, submarines could be tracked and neutralized. The carrier was the apex predator of naval warfare, projecting power across thousands of kilometers with near certainty of survival. Hypersonic weapons changed that equation. The carrier was no longer untouchable. It could be held at risk by a missile launched from over 1,000 kilometers away, traveling too fast to intercept, and capable of maneuvering to defeat countermeasures. The weapon did not need to sink the carrier to achieve strategic effect. Mission killing the flight deck, destroying the island superstructure, or even forcing the carrier to operate at extended range degraded its combat value substantially. Naval strategists began re-evaluating deployment doctrines. Should carriers operate closer to shore and accept the risk? Should they remain at standoff distances and accept reduced effectiveness? Should alternative platforms such as smaller, more distributed surface combatants or unmanned systems take on missions previously assigned to carrier air wings? There were no easy answers. The carrier remained the most versatile and capable platform in the U.S. naval inventory. But its vulnerability to hypersonic attack was now a quantified risk rather than a theoretical concern. And that risk was going to shape every deployment decision moving forward. Allied nations took note. Japan, South Korea, and Australia all relied on U.S. carrier presence as a deterrent against regional aggression. If carriers could be pushed back by hypersonic threats, the credibility of extended deterrence weakened. Conversations about missile defense cooperation intensified. Requests for Aegis system upgrades increased. But the hard truth remained. No current system could reliably intercept a Mach 15 maneuvering target. Iran understood the leverage it had gained. The Fateh II test was not just a technical demonstration, it was a signal. The Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the waters surrounding Iran were no longer safe operating areas for U.S. carriers. The Navy could still deploy there, but it would do so under the shadow of a weapon it could not counter. That constraint changed the balance of power in the region. 2 days after the repositioning, Iranian officials issued a statement. The Fatah II was described as a purely defensive system intended to protect Iranian sovereignty against foreign aggression. The statement noted that the missile had the range to reach any naval formation operating in the region and that Iran possessed sufficient inventory to conduct sustained operations if necessary. The exact number of missiles was not disclosed, but the implication was clear. This was not a single prototype, it was an operational capability. Satellite imagery analyzed in the days following the test showed increased activity at Iranian missile production facilities. New components were being moved into assembly halls. Mobile launchers were being relocated to hardened shelters. The infrastructure supporting the Fatah II program was expanding, not contracting. The USS Eisenhower remained at its new station, 400 kilometers farther from the coast than it had operated the previous week. Flight operations continued. Missions were flown, but the tempo was different. The confidence was different. The era of unchallenged carrier dominance had encountered a hard limit, and everyone involved understood that the limit was not going away.